From above, the ancient city of Teotihuacan looks like a gigantic geometrical shape, so perfect that it almost seems artificial. But how do you get such an image when viewed from a drone? The answer was found just below its surface. And what researchers discovered there is so bizarre that the consequences will shake your reality. But first, we have to go back to 2017, when drone photography was still in its infancy. This Mexican researcher wanted to show off his brand new quadcopter. With shaking hands, he launched the 4-propeller aircraft high into the sky and filmed the pyramids of the sun and the moon. But to his horror, the battery was running out of power. He had to land the thing immediately. But when he returned home, the video went online and the public gasped at the view they were shown. When these 2 pyramids were built between 450 BC and 400 AD, the builders must have used incredible technology to create such perfect geometric shapes. So the next year, archaeologists set up camp here to dig up the past and find out how the city was built. But the work quickly came to a standstill because the site is protected by law. No permits were given, and the only clue as to how to get under the earth was this strange geoglyph. What nobody knew at the time, however, was that the whole place was cursed, because whoever sets foot here loses their mind. You don't believe me? Then let me tell you about what happened to an amateur explorer who risked his life for the forbidden knowledge, and what happened to him after he entered one of the tunnels. In 2018, the internet user known as Ian Zelai published a video in which he showed the world what lies beneath the earth in Teotihuacan. In it, he ventured into a secret tunnel system that had remained hidden for centuries. But his adventure began much more innocently. When he received a message from a follower, he wrote to him that he had seen a hole in the Pyramid of the Moon and wondered what was going on down there. Was it maybe a tunnel entrance? Well, he thought it was worth investigating, though he never expected to discover something that would change his life forever. With flashlight in hand, he slowly descended into the gaping abyss, and after about 30 minutes, he found another tunnel that led further down into the ground. At first, he couldn't see anything, but when his eyes got used to the darkness, he realized that the tunnel walls were covered with strange symbols. They were made about 2,000 years ago with great care and detail. Some figures seemed to be gods, and others seemed to be people. But what did it all mean? As he continued deeper into the labyrinth, his flashlight suddenly flickered before going out completely, plunging him into total darkness. Moments later, the air grew cold, and he heard voices whispering in his ear, although he was all alone. Of course, he ran away from the creepy murmurs, which sounded like they were coming from ghosts. But then he stopped. For a moment, because he realized that he didn't actually feel afraid, but rather incredibly curious. As soon as he turned his flashlight back on, he saw that some of the glyphs glowed in eerie blue, as if they were reacting to his presence. So he started to circle around, trying to figure out what it all meant. And then he discovered something incredible. All the signs were arranged in a particular order and formed a kind of map. It looked as if the entire pyramid was a giant key, each notch corresponding to a certain constellation in the night sky. He also noticed that the glyphs in the center seemed to pulsate slightly. That's why the wall seemed to glow. Fascinated, he put his hand on the icy stone slab, and suddenly everything changed. A huge wave of energy surged through his body, and at the same time, voices rang out again. Only now he understood what they were saying. They spoke the dead language of the Aztecs, called Nahuatl. They told him that long ago, this place had been a sacred temple where a powerful race lived. However, they had brought ruin upon themselves because they refused to listen to the warnings of their priests. And so now they were doomed to wander the earth as restless spirits, condemned to walk the halls of their once great city until the end of time. As he listened to the sad tale, he felt overwhelmed by the sadness of the spirits. He could feel their pain. But then the walls began to rumble, sealing themselves hermetically against the outside world. And so he had no choice but to flee through the dark corridors, desperately seeking an escape. After what seemed like hours, he finally found it and climbed up to the surface, gasping for breath. But as soon as the sun hit his skin, he remembered nothing more. But when he woke up in the hospital, his memory had returned, along with a strange gift. While exploring the pyramid, he had learned to speak Nahuatl fluently, even though he had never studied the language and had no idea how. But he wasn't just gifted with linguistic skills, because since that day, he could also understand animals and plants and knew where to find rare herbs that had healing powers. However, what happened to him next gave him nightmares for weeks. During his expedition, he encountered a group of explorers who introduced themselves as members of a secret society dedicated to uncovering the mysteries of the ancient world. They recognized that he was special and offered him a place among them. Intrigued, he accepted and learned that they had been watching him for a long time. They showed him countless wonders hidden beneath the earth, including giant vaults filled with gold and precious stones. And everywhere he saw writings on the walls that told of a time when highly developed civilizations flourished in Central America. These people weren't savages, but highly intelligent beings who lived in harmony with nature. Yet the most shocking discovery was yet to come, because deep in the vaults, Ian Zalai stumbled upon a vast library containing countless clay tablets, papyrus scrolls, and leather books. But the contents drove him to despair. There were written records of a terrible war that had taken place thousands of years ago. It told the story of a powerful empire that waged merciless war on neighboring regions, conquering everything in its path. The troops killed everyone in sight and dragged their corpses into huge pits, burying them alive. But that wasn't all, because after digging up many of the bodies, they cut them open and removed their internal organs, which they either threw away or ground into powder. However, the craziest part of the recordings was that the perpetrators didn't come from this world at all. According to the documents, they were extraterrestrials who landed in Teotihuacan with flying machines that looked like giant birds. Although the natives tried to defend themselves against the invasion, they stood no chance. And so the extraterrestrial invaders subjugated the population and even bred slaves, experimenting on them and trying to create new races. However, the prisoners didn't stay silent, because eventually a resistance formed that fought against the occupiers. And in the end, both sides agreed to bury the hatchet. Together they founded a new civilization that should rule the world, united and unshakable. But what does that mean for our world today? Are we living in a world ruled by reptilian humanoids who want to keep their true origins a secret? Or are they perhaps distant relatives of the dinosaurs that somehow survived the mass extinction? But before we can answer that question, I have another for you. Have you liked the video so far? If so, please take a moment to hit the thumbs up button. It only takes a split second and helps us enormously with our work. Now, let's get back to the topic. However, after the peace treaty, the extraterrestrial guests left the planet again, and humanity continued to develop independently. But in the meantime, the newcomers had become very powerful, and the texts tell of how they decided to seal the city under the pretext of a big festival. No one knows exactly how they managed to sink the city into the ground. But one thing is certain, only a few managed to escape the fate of being buried alive. And so the survivors fled to other parts of the world and told stories of the terrible events to future generations. However, over time, the stories were forgotten and the places were lost. So humanity could develop in peace until the 19th century, when explorers rediscovered the ruins of the once great city. But the truth is that Teotihuacan is still inhabited by spirits who refuse to rest in peace. And every time someone gets too close, they use telepathy to try and warn them off. But if that doesn't work, the whispering walls will drive them mad. And so it was with Ian Zilai when he ventured into the depths of the earth. He became a vessel for the spirits who granted him their powers and knowledge. But the question remains, is he still himself, or has he become a servant of the ancients? Maybe he'll reveal the truth in the next video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.